What is 7,088 plus 1,621? Now, many of you will have children, as I do, doing GCSEs, but I'm not setting you a maths quiz. I don't mind that the answer is 8,709, because the real answer is victory in the Hamilton by-election, because 8,709 is more than the Labour vote, which was 8,559. I've been talking for some time about the need to reunite the right, and people have thought that I'm doing this purely in the self-interest of the Conservative Party. But what Hamilton shows is that reform needs the Conservatives as much as the Conservatives need reform. Conservatives were never going to win in Hamilton. We were third in the last elections there in 2021. We've gone down to fourth, but we were never in the contest to win. This is one of those seats, one of those areas where reform can win by appealing to people who would be very reluctant, particularly in a Scottish context, to vote Conservative. And we want to maximise the vote of people who broadly agree, because we operate in a first-past-the-post system. And it's worth reflecting on why we have that system and why it is in fact a good system, a better system than proportional representation. And the comparison I'll make is with Germany. Because in Germany, in recent elections, it really hasn't mattered who you voted for. The two main parties have come together and formed a coalition. They've played a little bit of musical chairs to change from one party leading to the other. But the fundamentals of government haven't changed. And this has led to real frustration with voters who feel that they can't affect change in their system. In first past the post, you can affect change, and a party once in government can do things and can be held to account if it doesn't do them. It's also broadly much more democratic to have a party in charge that normally in our system has won 40% plus of the vote, rather than giving the real power to a party that's just won 5% of the vote and is the final top-up of a coalition. That doesn't seem to me to be a proper democratic way to operate. So first past the post is a good and robust system. More importantly, it's the one we've got, and we've got to work with the systems that operate in our country. So back to why it's important to reunite the right. Well, there are so many shared values between the Conservative Party and the Reform Party. We believe in the nation state. We believe that decisions should be made in a sovereign parliament. We believe in putting the interests of individuals above the interests of the state. That is to say, we believe the state society is created by individuals and their families coming together, not by the top-down socialist way where the state ought to be directing your lives. We are both parties committed to a proper reduction in immigration, something that so many people in this country are genuinely angry about because of the failed promises, the impossibility to deliver whilst we're in the European Union, and since we've left, the failure to deliver on reducing migration. That is a matter of urgency. Most people in the Conservative Party and everyone in Reform wants to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, because we believe the best protector of our human rights is the King in Parliament, is democracy, is our constitutional system. A constitutional system of the greatest antiquity, and one that has protected freedoms since time immemorial. Bear in mind, 1215, Magna Carta is a reaffirmation of rights. It is not a creation of rights. When the barons were going to King John, they were saying, these are rights we have always enjoyed. We enjoyed them from the time of Edward the Confessor. That's been our protection of rights, not some foreign court and some international treaty. Reform and the Conservatives are agreed on this. We also believe, both parties, in low taxation and personal responsibility and dealing with the welfare bill. I'm glad to say that Nigel Farage is now talking about helping family life, something I feel very strongly about. Having 6 children, I think it's fundamental to our society. So shared values means that it is in our interest to work together in a first-past-the-post system. The other point is, of course, that our opponents are already doing it. Many people involved in politics locally will be aware of quiet local deals that are done at a council level. That in Bath and North East Somerset, it was obvious at the last set of elections that the Lib Dems, Labour and the Greens were backpedalling in some wards and I suppose forward-pedalling in other wards against the Conservatives to ensure that their main opponent was defeated as often as possible. We should be doing the same. We saw in the local election results that in Devon and in Wiltshire, the Lib Dems won. Why? Because the Conservative and the Reform vote was split. We have a socialist mayor of the West of England combined authority, which would have been won by Reform had Reform had the Conservative votes. So across the country, there would be more small c Conservative government if we had been willing to cooperate, to collaborate in the interests of the nation. And this becomes even more pressing when a general election is in view. Again, in Somerset, it was perfectly clear that the Labour Party worked very hard in North East Somerset and Hanham. The Liberals did very little. In Frome, where the other part of my seat went, the Lib Dems worked very hard and Labour did nothing. The opposition parties were quite clear, where they were fighting the Tories as their main opponent, that they weren't going to fight each other. And that increased the number of left-wing members of Parliament to the disadvantage, not just the narrow disadvantage of the Conservative Party, but the disadvantage of conservatism generally. When we come to the next general election, there will be so much to be done. This Labour government is as bad a Labour government as I can think of. It's not a soft left, Blairite, new Labour government. It's not one that welcomes prosperity or understands that people making money is good for everybody in the country, improves the general standard of living. It is a fierce socialist government that is destroying. Look what it's done to business in the 20% death duties raid. The average manufacturing industry makes 7.1% return on capital each year. That means after tax, it will take about 5 years for a business to pay off the death duties that will arise when the founder dies, or indeed an heir dies. For 5 years, a business won't be able to invest, won't be able to expand, won't be able to employ more people because it will be run for cash to pay the tax. This is a crippling blow to British industry. Labour has fanatical green policies. It's putting net zero on steroids, and I'm against net zero anyway. I think it's a terrible mistake. It's making people cold and poor. But Labour wants to make us colder and poorer. The 7th budget from the Climate Change Committee was advocating tax on meat and dairy, really deeply irresponsible policies that will make people very uncomfortable, will make our standard of living lower. Labour's also done nothing to control the borders. It got rid of the Rwanda scheme and has nothing to replace it with. So numbers crossing the channel go up and up. The illegal immigrants, who they don't even call illegal nowadays, they call them irregular. Nice bit of spin to pretend that it's perfectly in order. Illegal immigration is spiralling out of control, and legal migration has only actually come down because of things Rishi Sunak did, which are now working through the system. So by 2028-29, the state of this country will be one that needs real fundamental reform. It will need us to ignore many shibboleths that have been accepted across parties in recent years. We need to deal with the Human Rights Act, that is to say, repeal it. We need to deal with the Equality Act, that is to say, repeal it. We need to deal with the Climate Change Act. Yes, you guessed, that means repeal it, because we need economic growth, we need prosperity, we need a constitutional settlement that goes with the grain of our history, not the European continental one that Blair tried to impose upon us. And to do this, Tories and Reform have to swallow their pride. And we both need each other. Hamilton illustrated it in one occasion, in one recent instance, for Reform, but it's obvious for the Tories too. In my own seat at the last election, Reform won 7,000 votes, the Labour majority was 5,000 votes. It's not quite as simple as that, of course. Not everybody at the last election who voted for Reform would have voted Conservative, but many would have done. Those of us who are small c Conservative, part of the broad Tory family, need to think about what we really want. Do we want a continuation of a Labour government, potentially a Labour-Lib Dem coalition, or do we want something that is fundamentally conservative with a strong majority that can reform the country can revitalise the country in the way Margaret Thatcher did in 1979. Because if we want that level of change, whoever wins needs not only a majority as Starmer has in Parliament, but to do well in the country at large. Because although our system quite rightly depends on seats in Parliament, you need to have a moral mandate as well. You need, if you're doing big things, to have the mood of the country behind you, as well as simply the ability to win votes in Parliament. Starmer, with only 33% of the vote, is already finding that he doesn't have that moral mandate that reinforces the physical mandate that he's got through the House of Commons. If the Tories and Reform work together, we could have a physical mandate and a moral mandate and can institute the really important reforms, the 1979 style reforms, that can make this country great again. It's not just America that should be made great again, it's us. We were there first. We were greater first, and we should be greater again.